So you are doing your NEBOSH NG2 or your IG2 project, and you've decided that you're going to include a WRULDs hazard. Say that again. Work-related upper limb disorder hazard, and you want to put it on your risk assessment here. So I'm going to show you an example, and it's only an example, it's not for you to copy. We'll look at the who, might be, harmed, and how. We'll have a quick discussion then about the controls and the laws which apply, because you're going to need to know the legal standards when writing out your controls, and also for your specific legal arguments later if you have an action which is related to this hazard, of course. So the first thing that we should always do is go and check our hazard categories, and the hazard categories are right here in the guidance, and this is where we have our very first problem. You see, we have in element 6 we have two very closely related hazards. We have work-related upper limb disorders and we have manual handling. Now, a lot of people get these two things confused, but they're not that similar actually. You see, manual handling talks about the moving, the carrying, the transporting, the supporting of objects through bodily force. So pushing, pulling, carrying, lifting, lowering. The work-related upper limb disorder part of the course, and you've studied this, I hope, doesn't really talk about manual handling. It talks about repetitive movements, which might be manual handling, to be fair, like picking fruit. Or something repetitive like that. There is a small amount of manual handling, but the issue isn't the load and how much it weighs. It's more the repetitiveness, and it's more the strain and the force, maybe the static force, or maybe it's a postural issue, a workstation design issue. For example, you might be working on a conveyor belt and you're leaning over the conveyor belt. Let's say the conveyor belt is too high or it's too low for you. That's not quite the same as a manual handling hazard. So you have to understand what WRULDs are, what that category kind of addresses, and also what manual handling and what that category addresses. They are two very different things. Do not get them confused. If you're watching this and you're a NEBOSH student, did you know that you have a ton of resources on the Compassa website which you can use? Many of them are very, very cheap. You've got our YouTube section here, loads of free advice here, but if you want some study books, if you want exam technique documents, exam technique guides, instructions on how to do your NG2 or IG2 practical project, you can download those at some very, very reasonable prices from our website. And if you wanted hands-on tutor support with full access to all of our tutorials, guides, me and my colleagues at the tips of your fingers, consider signing up for our NEBOSH Rescue package. You'll get access to our full course and tutor support at a heavily discounted rate. And, well, frankly, you'll struggle to find pass rates that are as consistently high anywhere else. Let's get back to the advice. And there's a kind of a clue in here. Notice it says work-related upper limb disorders. It says in brackets ergonomics and workstation design. So the design of the workstation. So let's go to our risk assessment form, and we're going to type in work-related upper limb disorders. That will be sufficient. And what kind of examples can we think of? Well, in an office like we have here, we have the use of computer workstations. So it's what we call a DSE type hazard. So we could say use of DSE equipment, except that's not really enough. It's like that's an activity, it's not a hazard. DSE equipment is electrical. So when you say use of DSE, is it the electrical hazard you're after? So let's just be clear what we mean. You could go further and you could say poorly set up DSE equipment. And that's better, but the problem is, what do we mean by poorly set up? Like, what does that look like? The monitor's too low. Oh, great. Well, why do you say so then? For example, maybe people don't have monitors. Maybe they're just working on laptops. Or maybe there's just this kind of culture and everyone's just like this and everything's badly set up. Things are too high, things are too low. You could say poorly set up DSE equipment, such as many monitors at the wrong height and people not taking sufficient breaks from the workstations. Okay, now we've got something a little bit more specific. We've got an example of what's poorly set up. We've got a duration of work issue. That's looking a lot clearer. Now, there are other types of work-related upper limb disorders. It might not be DSE. You may have somebody who is picking orders and putting things into a box repeatedly. So you could say picking orders of components from racking and putting them into small boxes repeatedly for 8-hour shift. And so again, we've kind of described the activity there. in some detail, and we've shown that it's repetitive and it's quite a long duration. So we're showing what's harmful. Now in the who might be harmed and how, again, we're going to need a who and a how. And the how is incident and harm. So the who would be order pickers do this task every day for a full shift, which is excessive and could suffer from WRULDs and repetitive strain injuries, such as, now this is where you want to be technical. Don't just say sprain or strain. Try to be as technical as you can, such as tendonitis or carpal tunnel syndrome. You have examples of actual ill health conditions in your course materials. Try to use those instead of being vague, like backache, neck ache, shoulder ache is hurting so much. Try to be specific with what you say. Next, you need to fill in the what are you already doing and what more do you need to do columns. And for that, well, we do need to try to use the law if there is a law which applies. So we have to put in everything legally required. And we also need to try to use the hierarchy of control as much as we can. Don't just, train people. Don't just give them breaks. Too easy. Try to do something better than that. So I would refer you back to your course materials, which give you loads of examples of how you fix these issues by changing the workstation design, changing the equipment, and to hopefully kind of engineer design the hazard out. In terms of what law do you use? Well, it depends on the hazard. If you're in the UK, a NEBOSH National General Certificate student, NGC, and if you have a DSC hazard like this one here, you've got the DSC regulations, which we've got here, the Health and Safety Display Screen Equipment Regulations 1992. These do have some specific duties. So it has requirements for the design of the workstation. It has a requirement around the daily routine, so with the breaks, eyesight, the training, and also the DSE assessment, which is legally required in there. It also goes into a bit of detail here about the design and what has to be provided in terms of the chair and the desk and so on. So you could have a look through those and you could use that to inform the controls on your risk assessment, and you could also use it if you wanted to in your specific legal arguments here if you have a DSE related action which you're taking forward. But what if it's not a DSE hazard? What if it's bricklaying or something like that? Well, we have another regulation here called the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations, and in here there is Regulation 11, which applies to workstations. And it talks about the workstation, how it's arranged and how it has to be suitable. It talks about the seating and it talks about footrests as well. So it doesn't really get into ergonomics all that much, but you could just broadly say that the workstation is not suitable and therefore that's why it needs to be redesigned. If that doesn't seem appropriate to you, doesn't quite work with your hazard or your action, you could just use a General Health and Safety at Work Act Section 2 argument if that is all you've got to go with. For the international students, the NEBOSH IGC students, well, again, there isn't a whole lot to go on, generally speaking. I'll show you a quick screenshot from our course materials. We do have a number of industry-related ILO codes of practice. So if you work in these industries, construction, iron, steel, agriculture, there are codes of practice which do mention ergonomic hazards in workstations. You could use those if those industries apply to you. But if you are not in one of those industries, then I'm afraid you're probably just going to have to use the general ILO C155 or the R164 recommendation. Use the duties in there to justify why the action is required. Hope you found that useful. I'll see you in the next topic.